Welcome to The Wealth Effect. Today we have our fourth special guest, Jose Mendoza, who practices traditional Chinese medicine, Qigong, by blending ancient healing wisdom with cutting-edge scientific knowledge. Jose guides clients on transformative journeys of physical, mental, and spiritual healing using his vast understanding of the interconnectedness of physical, energetic, and spiritual. He empowers individuals to take charge of their healing to unlock optimal health, vitality, and a profound shift in their lives. Thank you for being on podcast, Jose.
Thank you for inviting me here. It's an honor.
Before getting started, can you explain to me and our guests what exactly is Qigong?
Absolutely. Qigong is, in essence, when you break it down into Chinese characters, yeah? You look at the characters, you look at the meaning. Qi refers to energy, whereas Gong refers to like work or something that's hard or difficult. Yeah, it's a skill. Thus, Qigong is the skill of life force energy, in a sense.
Oh, okay. And what got you into this study of medicine? Because to me, it seems like a very like different path than most people see or even promote that I see.
So I got my start as a registered cardiovascular invasive specialist. So I was working in hospitals with minimally invasive cardiovascular procedures. The thing is, it's a process where people come in, they get their symptoms relieved, but some of them don't take care of themselves and they end up being, in essence, repeat customers, you could say.
Mm.
Yeah. They come back for the same issues time and time again. So as I was noticing this, then I started thinking, well, is there something deeper that's not being addressed? Because I started understanding, for example, if you have a headache, you pop Tylenol or you pop Advil, and that gets rid of the headache. But what if you get consistent headaches? What's the problem then? Because you're then constantly taking these pills to cover it up, but you're not getting rid of the headache. So I came across this system, the system of Qigong, early on. And so it stayed on the back burner as I was working in the medical field. Over time, I began to get pulled more towards that path because there was more understanding and clarity on my end and more experience with the benefits that you get from it. You have to remember, in the environment that I was in, it's a really high stress environment. And I mean really high stress environment because we get people that would go from being in a stable state to being in a very unstable, crashing state rapidly. So one of the benefits that I received through this practice was the ability to really stay calm under pressure when everybody else was in a very hectic state with their adrenaline pumping and their heart rate through the roof. I was able to keep a more composure, so to speak. Now, what ended up happening was once COVID came around, I had an opportunity to go study and get a doctorate in the Chinese energetic medicine based on the fundamental theory behind Chinese medicine. The difference is that this system was more complete, whereas Chinese medicine works and attacks, you could say, the causes behind symptoms or other problems. There are other issues with the system, but this is like a political aspect because of China. But this system brought all these older ancient aspects that were tossed out when China took over. Because China tried to make it very scientific, which is great. But in the process, they removed a lot of these other teachings that would be beneficial. The philosophical aspect, for example, is mostly removed because they wanted to focus just on fixing the issues, similar to how we do things in the medical system. So now I went in, completed a doctorate, and I'm now set in a position where we have this complete system that has the old philosophical teachings in and bringing that into people's lives so that they don't end up falling into these looping patterns and end up coming back and having to suffer through the same problems that seem to be plaguing us in our modern times.
Yeah, and how was that education studying is it like a 1, 2, 3, 4 year course? And how did you finance it? Or was it like pretty accessible to pay off on your own or the other methods?
So it was a 4 year program, a little longer because it started just before COVID.
Mm.
And then there was a pause in between when everything was shut down and then picked back up. But it was a 4 year, 4,000 hour program. And so with the cost of the program, the cost of travel, the cost of hotel stays and everything else that's included with it, it's a price tag. It really is. It's a price tag. But when COVID happened, I transitioned from the job that I was in, which was a full-time medical job, to a different type of full-time medical job. Because within the medical field, there's a type of work that's called traveling. We're called travelers. And essentially, we're like contracted workers where there's a need at a certain location and they contract us for at least a minimum of 13 weeks. Now, with that, there's time that could be built in to take vacation, for example, because with a traditional job, typically you have paid time off. In these, you have to build it in ahead of time. So if you know you're going to go somewhere and be somewhere for 4 months, and there are a couple days that you need off, you have to put it in ahead of time. And so that gives you the time off. So I was able to finance it through that type of work. And at the same time, I was able to get the time to go and really delve into the in-person aspects of it. So when it came down to it, it's like the medical field that I was working in financed it. And in terms of time, I was able to also dictate my time to go do that. And then, of course, there's the daily stuff that has to be done, the daily study, yeah? So then I also had that time working for me because when you're in the medical field in the position that I'm in, there are periods of time where you have to be on standby, or they call it on call. During those moments, you're earning per hour a small rate, but something until you get called in for a need, whether it's an emergency case or anything else. So that's essentially how I was able to go through that program, was working at different locations during different times, being able to set the time aside, and then of course being able to have the time to study as well during downtime.
Wow, that's a pretty good like way of going about things and not dropping everything and not having a quick, not quick, but like a stable foundation to really go deep into your studies without having to worry too much about money. Um, what exactly are these energies? Like, how do they help people? Are they like how some people might say, like manifesting like certain things like well-being or money? Like, how do they work?
So think of, because it's such a loaded thing, there's so much to go in there. For example, the word chi, right? What chi are we talking about? People will dictate it in English as energy. Yes, to an extent, but which chi? Because when you look at the philosophy, there's things such as sha qi, wei qi, ling qi. So like there's different types of qi. But at its core essence, it's energy. And what does energy do? We think about it like a river. A river flows. It goes in the direction it needs to go. It doesn't fight, and it's always constantly in motion. This is the same thing with energy. And if you think about it, what does your energy do? Like physically, you wake up, you go about your day. At the end of the day, you get a little tired, you go to bed, you wake up, you continue the same cycle. It's constantly a motion, a cycle that you go through as well in the daily. So then where are the issues? Well, there's a little thing called a beaver, let's say. And if a beaver comes in, it'll obstruct a river. And now it creates a dam, and that downstream is now impacted. There's no flow. That's an issue because everything that needs the river downstream is now affected. You might get a trickle, but it's not what you really need. It's not going to be enough to sustain the fish that are downstream, the plants that are downstream, and everything else. So now you've impacted the whole thing. And this is something that happens in daily life. Is there are obstructions and blockages to energy that hinder us. For example, a lot of people tend to drink coffee in the morning. Now, drinking coffee in and of itself is not an issue. The problem is once you build a rhythm of adaptation to the caffeine, now we have a problem because most people don't feel awake until they've had their coffee. And there's correlations and studies that have shown that people that get this adaptation to caffeine, if you compare their cognitive level before, let's say, this is their baseline level. When they wake up in the morning after being adapted to caffeine, they're here. And the caffeine brings them to base level. Now, if they were at base level and had caffeine, it brings them up here. So it brings them beyond their base level. That represents a crutch. That represents a blockage because now you're not operating at 100%. You need to have an external thing to help you operate at 100%. So, when talking about the energies, and it's not just caffeine, but when talking about the energies, there are multiple things that happen throughout the day. Think about how many things we burden ourselves on the daily with. You have to worry about the bills, you have to worry about the family, you have to worry about the finances, you have to worry about, your job. All of these things impact the energies that flow within you. And that's just as a general. Then there's still the minutia. For example, the Starbucks employee messed up your coffee. Now you're upset and that threw off the rest of your day. You only got 5 hours of sleep the night before. Now you're not going to be working optimally and probably pounding more coffee because you need it to help you get through. So every day presents a little challenge. But at the end of the day, the concept is when it comes to the energy, we want it to flow. We want it to flow smoothly. So a person that gets their energy to flow smoothly is like that river. Everything functions as it should, from upstream to downstream.
And how does your practice go about like helping either decrease these blockages or get rid of them completely? How does that work?
Let's go back to the beaver example. Okay? Every stick that the beaver uses is an event that's happened to you. Big sticks, small sticks, whatever the case is, something was always thrown on there. And so it begins to impede the flow. It may not be fully blocked, but if you have enough of these sticks in different areas along the river, the downstream comes down to a trickle. So in my practice, it comes down to two things. The first thing is I can help you, but the second thing is you have to help yourself. And how do we go about doing that is we go find the dam. We get rid of the easy sticks. That's how you tear the dam apart first. Whatever's light and easily removable, we take out. If a stick is stuck, I'm not pulling that out. There's no point in me exerting the excess effort, nor you putting in the excess effort to force it out. And I'll tell you why in a moment. We take off the easy stuff first. And this could represent the minor things that have happened that day. Once you begin to do this, something magical happens. The river begins to push through the dam. Over time, as you keep removing these sticks, and you progress from smaller and easier to bigger sticks, yet still easy because they're ready to go, eventually the dam itself will break from the pressure that has been built up by the river. And this is what I mean by it's a you and me thing. One person could do it by themselves, but it's good to have two because you need one removing and one keeping an eye to say, hey, this is ready to go. Like, let's step back and let it do its thing. So it's a facilitative process, but at the same time, I'm helping you advance. So it's like going and receiving instruction in something, but you're not being given the answers. You find the answers on your own, but you're guided to the answers. That's another example that I can give.
And typically, where do you provide these services at, like hospitals or a private practice? Or how do you go about finding clients, or how do they come to you?
Mostly, I have a private practice, and that could be an in-person or a distance thing. So it doesn't have to be in person. That's the wonderful thing. Because when you think about it, energy, as we talk about it, anything could be considered energy. Yeah? Energy is the ability to do work. As I'm speaking right now, these words are coming out and they're vibrating the air that then reaches your ears. That's an example of energy transmitting through the air. Now, the words that I say could also affect your thought processes and your understanding, and that in a sense could cause a physical response as well. I like to equate it to how a tiger would walk in the room and you notice a tiger. The first thing you do is you immediately go into a state of flight or flight because that light that's vibrating to you from the orange pelt, the stripes, the face of the tiger, yeah, that causes you to have an internal reaction that then causes the body to kick in. So that's why it's like the distance can be done as well. And in terms of finding these people, it's really they sort of come to you. It's interesting. It's never a fact where we get obsessed with I have to seek, I have to seek, I have to find, and you lay out a plan and everything, and that's good, that's helpful. But the way this in particular works is the ones who need you at that moment tend to be the ones that show up. For example, recently, which was a completely just off the rail surprise when this happened, is there was a lady who fell really ill, and I happened to be there. She was passing out on the floor. She was having digestive distress. She was really pale. We had to call an ambulance. We didn't know what was going on. So I initiated doing some work on her with her permission. And she began to get some color. She felt a little better, but she wasn't 100%. The ambulance came by. They loaded her up in the gurney. She vomited on the way out. And when we come to find out was that later she was suffering from food poisoning. That's what the diagnosis was at the hospital. But she was already better by the time she got to the hospital because she had vomited that out. And initially she wasn't able to vomit it out, but it wasn't until after the session. Yeah. But this is an example of how sometimes they find you, you don't find them. And it's always in unexpected places.
And how do you go about, like, I wouldn't say convincing, but more explaining to someone how this really does impact a person that doesn't really believe in this traditional type of healing, more of a like the modern Western type of like doctors that prescribe pills, medication, rather than a different like alternative way of healing?
It really comes down to having an experience with it. Because like anything, should you trust what someone else tells you? Because far too often I say that for a lot of people, if someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, I thought this was great, check this out," you might believe them. Sometimes we hear things and we tend to parrot those things, but we don't go through and see it for ourselves. We don't go through and experience it for ourselves. I don't have to prove anything to anybody, just like you don't have to prove anything to anybody. They have to prove it to themselves, and the only way to do that is through experience. For example, how would you go about explaining to someone the taste of vodka or the taste of whiskey if they've never had alcohol before?
That's pretty hard because it's such a unique thing that just like any other thing doesn't have like a straight up comparison.
Yeah, it's hard to find the words and hard to find the comparison. Like we can talk about the qualities. We could tell them, well, it stings. It could be smooth or not smooth. We could kind of give them an idea, but there's nothing for them to perceptually grasp and say it's like this until they've had their first drink. So this is no different. You don't need to learn it from anybody, believe anybody, or anything else. You have to experience it for yourself to say, okay, now I know what this is. That's really the only way.
Yeah, that's true. And for someone, because this sounds a lot to me like a mental health as well, like you have to lean into it to really try to go for it. Because even me, of like a few years back, didn't really believe in much of mental health till it started impacting me. And I'm like, wow, this really does help. Like people should look into this because even though we all think we're strong on the inside, like mentally or physically, there's still things that like degrade our well-being. And I think this could be an important part of someone's life to practice any like techniques. Like, do you have any like recommendations of like how to start practicing like well-being in this way?
Absolutely. So this modality is truly holistic. The word holistic means that the whole being greater than the sum of the individual parts. In other words, this is really a complete system. When I mentioned that China took out some of the stuff back when it was bringing it in, we have those aspects added back into this modality. So we're working on all fundamental levels. We're working on the body, work on the energy, we're working on the mind or the spirit. Yeah. Now, the way we do that is any one of those three affects the other two. Okay. For example, if you go into a gym and you begin to exercise and you work out to a point that you physically look good, you physically feel good, that's going to change your mindset. So already, without doing any extra work, you affected your mental capacity. And this work, it's no different when we're looking at that. So one of the things that I want you or anybody else that's listening to try is this, is I just want you to notice as you're breathing. I want you to notice two things. Are you breathing into your chest or your belly? The second thing is, are you breathing through your nose, in and out, or are you breathing through your mouth, in or out? So once you have that and you've noticed that, now what I want you to do is gasp for me. And notice how you gasped. Was it through your mouth or nose? Did it fill your chest or did it fill your belly? When you gasp, it goes in through your mouth and it fills your chest. This is the same as if you saw a tiger. Why? Because it activates the sympathetic nervous system. That's the fight or flight system. It puts you in a state of stress where you lose blood flow to the brain, specifically the reasoning, upper reasoning aspect, shuttles it from the digestive system to the muscles because you need to fight or flight. So now you're in a state where you can't really think, you just act and react. So if you're constantly breathing in either through your mouth and inhaling and expanding the chest, this is the signal you're sending to your body 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. How could you expect to optimally live like that? Instead, it's a return to a natural state. So what's the natural state? If you see a baby or even an animal, if you look at a cat or a dog, you'll notice that when they breathe, their belly expands. They breathe in through the nose and the belly expands. So then what you want to do is switch from breathing in this upper chest to breathing down into the belly. Now what you're doing is you're activating the system associated with relaxation, calm, safety. And you're ensuring that your digestive is not going to be hampered. Stress does hamper the digestive system. Like we said, it shuttles blood away. But also it has a calming effect on the mind because you're stimulating the nerve responsible for that, which is the vagus nerve. So instead of sending the signal of stress and I'm not safe, now you're sending a signal of calm. And the challenge is to be doing this 24 hours a day, breathing in through your nose and expanding the belly, the lower abdomen.
Wow, that's pretty insightful. That's very interesting. I haven't heard it be spoken like that or really in any way. But if people want to reach out to you, can they, like, if they want to learn more about this or schedule some type of consultation, or how can they go about that?
Absolutely. So I have my website, risetohuman.com. And there I have some more information. If you wanted to read, there's a couple blogs up there. There's a place where you can book a consultation with me and communicate. Or you could also reach out to me on Instagram. J as in Juliet, M as in Mary, D as in Diego, C as in Charlie, E as in energy, M as in medicine. And that's on Instagram. And you could just message me there too.
That's very interesting. Any final words for our audience to leave them with?
The biggest thing is when it comes to life, the only consistency is change. And you have the capacity to change into whatever it is that you want to be. The only question is, where are you stopping yourself? And why are you stopping yourself? Because change is the constant in life, and that's what leads to flow. So why not be in flow?
Well said. Thank you for being on podcast. All your links and everything will be in the description below. So if you want to reach out to him, feel free to. Hopefully he can provide some type of way that you've been looking for to heal or grow better. And thank you for being on podcast, Jose.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
Thank you.